Okay, let's get into this. We've got some really fascinating material here about Luxor Temple.
Yes, it's quite a collection. It really lets us see the temple not just as, an ancient monument, but as a place that's still revealing things.
Exactly. It's about ongoing discovery, preservation efforts, and just layers upon layers of history. We're drawing on archaeological reports, some tourism research, papers on specific art styles.
Mhm.
And the idea is to look at Luxor Temple through the eyes of the people actually studying and saving it, to see what makes it so complex and maybe highlight some details you might miss otherwise.
It gives you a real sense of the place as a living site, not just ruins. You see the challenges, the discoveries.
And we should definitely mention Luxor Temple is part of the bigger UNESCO World Heritage Site, Ancient Thebes, with its necropolis.
That's crucial. It signifies its global importance, something that needs protection for, well, forever, really.
So our aim here is to get a feel for that whole story, how it was built, how it changed over millennia, and how we're still learning about it.
Right. Let's start with the setting.
Okay, so Luxor Temple is right in the modern city of Luxor.
Which itself sits within ancient Thebes, a hugely important city in Egyptian history.
And when you look at the temple complex, especially the big areas like the Colonnade Hall or the small Temple of Amun,
Hmm.
you can physically see these different historical layers.
Absolutely. One period built right over or next to another. It wasn't just one pharaoh's project and done.
They evolved.
It evolved, yeah.
Yeah.
Different rulers, different cultures even, added their bits, left their mark. And a lot of the research we're looking at focuses on the east bank of the Nile. That's where Luxor and Karnak temples are.
And the incredible detail we know comes from painstaking work like that of the Epigraphic Survey team. They're based right there.
They are at Chicago House in Luxor. And their documentation work is, well, it's meticulous, doesn't quite cover it.
How do they actually do it?
So it involves really precise drawing by hand. They call it penciling. It captures nuances in the reliefs that photos sometimes miss. But they also use a lot of photography, large format, film, digital, and this technique called photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry. What's that involve?
Ah, okay. So basically you take a whole series of overlapping digital photos of an object or a surface from, all different angles.
Right.
And then specialized software uses those photos to build a really accurate 3D model. It's fantastic for things like columns, curved walls, places where a flat photo would just distort the carvings.
Got it. So you can see the relief properly.
Exactly. And they also do what's called collation, comparing different photos or records of the same inscription to make sure every single detail in their final publication is spot on.
It sounds almost like detective work on history.
It kind of is. They're focusing this effort on several key spots right now. The small temple of Amun is a big one. They're preparing publications on its pillars, later editions.
Okay.
The bark shrine of Thutmose III, the late period portico, Taharka's gate, the Kushite pylon, even graffiti they found in the North Annex.
They document graffiti too.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh, absolutely. Every mark on the stone can tell you something. And it's not just the main temple areas. They're recording chapels linked to important figures, like the gods' wives of Amun Amenertis, Shippenwepet II.
Powerful women in their time.
Very. Nitocris, Mehetenvisket, too. So that means carefully photographing specific corridors, doorways, courtyards within those chapel areas. Every detail matters.
Yeah, all these records, the drawings, the old photos, the new digital files, they're kept safe.
Yes, in the Chicago House Photographic Archives. It's a massive archive preserving decades of this careful work. It ensures a record exists, even if the physical stone degrades over time.
Which brings us to the physical preservation side of things. It's not just about recording, is it?
Not at all. There's constant hands-on work. Simple things like clearing plants and debris that can damage the stone.
Sure.
But also really complex structural interventions. Like with the foundation stones, first they document them exactly where they are. Then they're carefully removed. If a block is too decayed, it gets treated. But any parts with important features like old door sockets or grooves, they try to save those bits and integrate them into new replacement stones.
Wow.
And they actually found something interesting below the lowest course of stones. You normally see an older, sort of historic foundation layer made of small sandstone bits and limestone gravel.
An earlier phase.
Yeah. So when they build a new foundation now, it's a whole septum. A layer of sand, then a thick plastic waterproof sheet, then a concrete slab, maybe 15 centimeters thick, and then topped with waterproof cement and lime mortar.
That sounds serious. Engineering, really.
It absolutely is. It's all designed to stop moisture rising up from the ground and damaging the sandstone blocks with salt. And it's not just stone they're working on, mud brick walls, too.
Ah, right. You see those around the temple precinct.
You do. And you can even tell a difference sometimes between the big bricks used back in Ramesses III's time and smaller ones from later periods. They've actually had to manufacture thousands of new mud bricks, like 18,500 bricks from 150 cubic meters of local soil just for repairs.
It's quite an operation. What about more modern problems, I'm thinking? Birds.
Pigeons, yes, definitely a problem. Bird mitigation is a constant headache, keeping the carvings clean.
What do they do?
They've tried different things, experimented with mirrors, for instance, to try and deter them. The main lesson seems to be it just needs constant effort. There's no single fix.
Right.
And all this conservation work, especially things like treating salt-damaged fragments, often gets support from outside organizations like USAID or RCE, the American Research Center in Egypt.
It's a huge international effort then. Let's maybe focus in on one particular pharaoh, an area Amenhotep III, and his work, especially in the Colonnade Hall. He was a major player here.
Huge. And what's really fascinating about his contribution to Luxor is how his artistic style changes in different parts of the temple.
How so?
Well, in the inner sanctuary areas, the reliefs are very elegant, quite formal, classic 18th dynasty style.
Okay.
But then you go out into his sun court, and the figures become, well, more naturalistic. You start seeing little details the king depicted with slightly longer legs, or noticeably heavy earlobes, maybe even a hint of a double chin.
Huh, really?
Yeah. And then on the main facade of the Colonnade Hall, the carvings show these incredibly elaborate, almost over-the-top costumes worn for ceremonies.
So different styles for different spaces. Why the change, especially that move towards naturalism?
It seems connected to his said jubilees. Those were major royal festivals, usually celebrated after 30 years of rule, meant to sort of magically rejuvenate the king.
Right, I've heard of those.
And the idea is that this evolving art style, especially incorporating more solar imagery, ties into this concept of the king becoming divine or unifying with the sun god, even while he was still alive.
Interesting. Deification during life.
Exactly. And there was this amazing opportunity recently they had to dismantle some of the huge columns on the east side of Amenhotep III's sun court for stabilization.
Because they were unstable?
Yes. But the unexpected benefit was it allowed the researchers for the very first time to get right up close, eye level, with carvings high up on those columns.
Oh, wow. So they could see details no one had seen properly before.
Precisely. Things you just can't appreciate from ground level. And part of the work involves hunting for statue fragments, too. They found pieces of a small goddess statue, for example, from the Colonnade Hall. And it told its own little story. It clearly showed signs of being repaired in antiquity, probably in the late period or Ptolemaic times.
An ancient repair job.
Yes. You could see how they blended the original 18th dynasty style with the later repair work. They even found evidence of a specific type of metal clamp, a dovetail clamp, used to hold the broken pieces together back then.
That's incredible. History repairing itself, almost.
It really is. They also found a piece of what looks like a third statue of the goddess Mut. It probably belonged to a group, a triad, originally housed in the Khonsu temple over at Karnak.
Showing the links between the temples.
Exactly. And right there in the Colonnade Hall, there's that massive seated statue of the god Amun and goddess Mut together. A dyad.
Dyad, meaning two figures carved as one piece.
Correct. It's huge. What's left of it stands over 3 meters tall, and it's nearly 2 meters wide at the base. The reports note specific measurements of the faces, legs, things like that. You can see staining on it from water-dissolving limestone dust over the centuries. And there's text on the back pillar suggesting it originally stood against the east side of the hall's north wall. It was broken, though, found snapped at the waist.
Still impressive.
Very. And then, in a really interesting twist, the head from a different smaller dyad statue of Amun was found in the ruins of a Byzantine church built later on the site.
Wow. So reusing materials centuries later.
Absolutely. It just shows how the site was continuously occupied and repurposed long after the pharaohs.
That continuity is a big theme, isn't it? The walls themselves aren't just decorated from one period. They have additions, inscriptions, even graffiti layered over time.
That's right. The temple walls are like a palimpsest, written on over and over again across millennia. After the big Ramesside pharaohs, you get later high priests adding things like a scene dedicated by Penujima I, or an inscription by another high priest, Shashank.
So, official additions. But then there's the more informal stuff, the graffiti.
Loads of it. You find markings from the Third Intermediate period. Then there's Coptic script, Christian inscriptions, and symbols scattered all over the place, often scribbled right on top of the ancient reliefs or near doorways and stairs, places people pass through.
Just people leaving their mark?
Pretty much. And Greco-Roman graffiti, too, little drawings people scratched into the stone. Things like a ship, a horse, maybe a soldier, a little seated figure. They even mention one specific Coptic inscription that's dated, Patmurt, day 30. Just a tiny snapshot of someone's life.
It's like 1,000 years of visitor comments etched in stone. Is it all ancient, though?
No, and that's interesting, too. The sources point out a modern fake, a spurious cartouche carved high up on a column in the colonnade hall. Someone tried to make it look like it belonged to an Amarna princess.
But it's not real.
Nope. The way the hieroglyphic signs are formed gives it away. It's clearly not ancient work. Someone trying to add their own bit of history.
Fascinating. Even fakery becomes part of the story. If we look closely at the original reliefs, the documentation captures amazing details, right?
Absolutely. The level of detail in the records is incredible. They note specific scenes, like the king offering flowers or bouquets to deities like Amun-Re-Khmutep, and sometimes tiny, unusual iconographic details pop out.
Like what?
Well, there's an example of offering tables shown with 3 legs in side view. Normally, you'd expect maybe 2 legs to be visible from that perspective. It's a small thing, but it's noted.
And the way figures are positioned matters too.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you'll see the king and a god facing each other directly, when maybe in a processional scene they both face the same way. That orientation can give clues about what the scene actually represents. Maybe it's about the king being formally inducted or welcomed by the god.
So every detail potentially carries meaning.
That's the idea. Even the choice of deities depicted in certain areas can be significant, like finding feline goddesses, Mut, Bastet, Sekhmet in specific spots might relate to protecting the king as he enters the sacred inner parts of the temple.
It's all interwoven.
And the layers continue even later. They've identified a tetrarchic cult room within the temple walls.
Tetrarchic, that's late Roman Empire, right?
Exactly, around the late 3rd, early 4th century AD. This room has Roman-style frescoes and seems to have been used as an imperial cult chamber dedicated to the Roman emperors centuries after the last pharaohs.
Wow, Roman emperors worship inside an Egyptian temple.
It shows the temple's enduring power and significance. Now, all these fragments we've mentioned, bits of statues, chunks of inscribed walls, where do they go when they're found?
They often end up in the block yard, I gather.
That's right. The block yard is basically a large, open-air storage and work area. It's essential. Fragments from all over the temple site are brought there to be cleaned, sorted, documented, and stored safely.
So it's like an archaeological library of fragments.
Kind of, yeah. They mention, for instance, photographing fragments that originally came from Amenhotep III's shrines south of the main temple. Those photos are then used for 3D modeling and archiving.
And the scale of this block yard work must be immense.
Oh, it's huge. They're working on creating 3D models of literally thousands of fragments. That includes all those Akhenaten Talitat blocks.
The smaller blocks from Akhenaten's dismantled temples that were reused as filler.
Exactly. Making 3D models of thousands of those alone is a massive undertaking, requires a lot of processing power and time.
It really drives home the difference between seeing the Grand Temple standing there and understanding the incredible effort involved in piecing its history back together from, well, fragments.
It's a giant, ongoing jigsaw puzzle.
So, bringing this back to anyone listening maybe thinking of visiting or just wanting to understand, Luxor Temple, as part of this World Heritage Site, is incredibly significant.
It really is. It's recognized as holding outstanding value for all of humanity, helping us understand our shared past.
And there's some research suggesting that if you, as a visitor, learn a bit about the place beforehand.
Yes, it can really change your experience. You start to see more than just impressive stones. You connect with the deeper stories, the different periods, the human effort involved over millennia.
And it probably helps foster an appreciation for why preserving these places is so vital.
Exactly. Visiting mindfully, with some understanding, actually contributes in a way to the site's future protection.
So when you look at Luxor Temple, you're not just seeing something ancient and finished. It's dynamic. Thousands of years of history are physically there in the stone.
And that history is still being uncovered, still being written through all this careful work by scholars and conservators today.
These layers we've talked about, from the huge building phases down to tiny graffiti marks, even those ancient repairs, they remind us that the complete story is still being assembled.
You have to wonder how many more secrets are still held in those walls and those fragments scattered in the blockyard, just waiting for this patient work to bring them to light. There's always more to learn about the incredible long life of Luxor Temple.